Hello and welcome to Video Revealed. I'm Colin Smith. I thought it would be time to look at stuttering slow playback in Adobe Premiere Pro. All right, I'm going to divide this into three sections: Premiere Pro, Media, and your system. Let's get into Premiere Pro first. I'm trying to replicate something that does happen even on the most powerful system, and that's a stuttering playback. If you ever find that the playback is stuttering and before that it was playing smooth, just hit the space bar, stop, hit it again, and play. Let me try to recreate this here. So I'll play this. That seems to be playing okay. And when you zoom to a different area and hit play, maybe turn on and off a different layer. Anyway, if this does occur, there we go, there we go, there we go, there we go. That's stuttering, that's stuttering. Hit the space bar again. And it plays back. Why does this happen? I don't know. Even on an incredibly powerful system, it can happen. So this one's easy to fix. And it's easy to tell if it is fixed if after you restart playback, it's smooth. Let's cover a few more things. If you want to check if you're dropping frames, you click on the little wrench and turn on the Show Dropped Frame Indicator. It's over here. When you mouse over, it will tell you how many frames you've dropped. So let me go back to the beginning. I'll hit play. You can see it's nice and green. I'm going to turn on and off my adjustment layers with Lumetri on it. Oh, and it seems to be okay. Maybe I'll shuttle over here and play. Shuttle over here and play. So no problems with that one. Let's go to this timeline. This stuff is HD and this stuff is not. There are two videos here. I've specifically did a quick mask and I'm playing this back and it's okay. So this is 2 layers of HD with a mask, a feathered mask, and I'm not dropping any frames. Let's go to this one, which is a little bit, oh, there we go. Now I'll mouse over, 3 drop frames during playback. And this one would be the same or worse. Oh, there we go. Yeah, oh, 25 frames. And we can see this particular one is 3840, 2160, and this one's 4096 by 2304. So both of these are larger than HD frames, and they're going to drop frames. And it's a good thing to turn that on. What we can do is this. Change this from full to something else. So I'll take it down to 1/4 and let's go back and hit play. Oh, we're still dropping frames. Yeah, there's no way we can play this back. Or that one. Wow. That shows you how poor playback is with very large files. So these are we'll get into media in a second, but these are very large 4K files that are also highly compressed. Sometimes you can turn this down to an 1/8 or a 1/16. That's usually for even bigger files that come from things like the Red Digital camera or Arri camera. The other thing to make sure is not turned on is this one. Oops, and it is turned on. I accidentally had that turned on. This is turned off by default. High quality playback has nothing to do with exporting your files. And even the resolution I'm showing you here has nothing to do with export. Export will always be perfect. But if I go back, let's try this back at full. Oh, and I am able to play this back. No drop frames. And this one, is it going to? Oh, it is going to play. Oh, no, we are dropping frames on the larger one, 19 drop frames. So even though I was able to play back the 3841, which is Ultra HD, the DCI 4K was definitely going to stop playback. So we could take this down to 1/4 now and make sure, again, we've got high quality playback turned off. Let's see what happens when we play this back at 1/4 resolution. There we go. Now it's important to understand this is one clip playing back 4K on an SSD. We'll get into discs in a minute, but this is playing back 4K in a machine with lots of RAM and lots of CPU. So if the second I did a dissolve, anytime you do any kind of an effect that involves 2 frames, now you're going to be playing back 2 streams of 4K. So that's twice as much data. But you can turn the resolution down and turn high quality playback off and turn on the drop frame indicator just to see if you are dropping any frames. The other one is in the effects. If you turn this button on, you'll see all the effects that are accelerated. So you can easily see if you're using an effect that has acceleration or not. A bunch of these are presets that I'm going to turn off. And there are the effects that you can see are accelerated. But they're accelerated only if you have a good enough GPU. So we'll get into your system in a second. So we can reduce the resolution, you can turn off high quality playback, and hopefully you'll be able to play things back. If you can't, then we have to start looking elsewhere. So now let's look at media. And what a lot of people seem to miss is when I ask someone about what codec they're using, they throw their hands up and they say, I don't know. Well, you are using a codec. Every video has, even uncompressed, is a codec. So most of you out there, YouTubers, are probably using H.264. If you're recording on anything like a DSLR, then it's H.264, which means it's incredibly compressed. That means every time you hit the space bar, Premiere Pro needs to decompress the video. So it needs to read the video and it needs to rebuild all the missing parts of that video. And that takes time. It also takes power and also takes disk access. So the compressed formats can be a huge problem. I showed you how we can get away with changing the resolution, but the higher the compression, the harder to play back. The other one is if you're using dynamic media. So if I drag in this particular motion graphics template, I know that this template, there's no way you can build something that looks like that in Premiere Pro. So this is an After Effects motion graphics template. And you'll see the red line show up and you'll see everything slow right down. That's because this, if we look over in the motion graphics templates, you'll see this is an After Effects comp, and this is using dynamic link. So even though I drag this from the essential graphics of Premiere Pro into the timeline of Premiere Pro, if this is an After Effects comp, it's still dynamic linking in the background out to After Effects dynamic link to be able to play that back. And I've got a whole tutorial on fixing dynamic link if you're having problems there. But you're not going to make this any faster. So a lot of editors now are becoming new to the fact that After Effects is an absolute dog. It's incredibly slow. Just because you've got something stuck in a Premiere Pro timeline doesn't make After Effects any faster. If it's After Effects and it's in the timeline and it's not rendered, it's going to be slow. All right, so that's media. Next up is your system. And this is usually what the problem is. It's not Premiere Pro or the media, it's your system. First of all, RAM. Premiere Pro tries very, very hard to stick as much in RAM to allow for quicker playback. So anytime you move your playhead to a position on the timeline, Premiere Pro will look for the media under the playhead and load anywhere from 50 to 150 frames on both sides of that playhead, which might be several different clips. And it's trying to load as much of that into RAM as possible. The machine I'm demoing on has 32 gigabytes of RAM. That's a lot of RAM. If you've got 8, you're pushing it. It's kind of slow. 16 would be about the minimum. If you've got 4, it ain't gonna work. So the amount of RAM is really important. Next, it's the CPU. And remember I mentioned that before, that if you're using compressed media, the CPU, not the GPU, the CPU has to rebuild all those frames and decompress the video before it even plays back. So you move the playhead to a point, it goes to the disk, tries to load it in RAM, decompress on the video, and before it's even done, you grab the playhead and moved it somewhere else, loading those frames, sticking it around. You moved it, loading it, and you're pushing your system. On any system, that's too far. And that's one stream. So if you're over top of a video with multiple layers and you've got blend modes or effects, holy smokes, all of that is going to cause a problem. So CPU and RAM. Then the next one, which is easier to fix, is disk speed. And I've got a whole stack of drives here that I have hanging around, and there's no way to tell from these drives which one is good and which one isn't. So you need to find out. And that is, we're going to show you something on Windows and something on the Mac for you to see what those drives are. The best is SSDs, are always the best. They're cheaper than ever now, and they play back wicked fast. The worst ones are the disk drives, the hard drives. They're called fixed drives, and they actually have a spinning disk, a platter, that are 5,400 RPM. So there are really 4 different solutions. First one is SSD. The next one is a RAID. And you can get some RAIDs. G-Tech will make a RAID, and they're not that big. This isn't the best. This is mainly for portable. But for desktop systems, they do make these giant RAIDs. This is an older one that actually has 3.5-inch discs in them, but it actually has 2 running at 7,200 RPM. 7,200 RPM is essential. A couple of these are discs that are 7,200 RPM. Those are fine, just fine. But when you use a RAID like this, what you're actually doing is you're combining multiple discs in here with one port, and that doubles the speed. So you've got twice as many. So at least 2 discs, 4 or 6 or more, up to 8 drives or more that you can put together. Promise is also another amazing company that has great RAIDs. They can get quite expensive, but the speed and throughput are insane. The other thing you have to remember is, what are you connecting it with? So if you went and bought an SSD and you're connecting it through USB 3, and you'll notice that even though the cables are white or blue or black, the connector is, so you can see that. The connectors always have that little blue piece in it. Guess where else this little blue indicator has to be? On your freaking computer. If you went out and bought a USB 3 drive and you plugged it into a USB 2 port, because these ports are the same, right? They're the same as a USB 2 port in your system. You're going to get USB 2 speed. USB 2, don't even think about it. It's good for archiving. You put the stuff out to archive, but not for playback. USB 2, bad. 5,400 RPM, bad, bad, bad. What's the best? USB 3 and SSD, or faster, USB, the newest USB 3.2 or USB-C, or Thunderbolt 2, Thunderbolt 3, and they just announced Thunderbolt 4. So how do I know if I have an SSD? Well, I'll show you on Windows. There's a program called Speccy, and you can download Speccy. I'll put a link in the description. One thing to be careful is that while you're installing it, turn off CC Cleaner. It wants to install while you're installing it. But this gives you an indicator of all the stuff in your system. So if we go over here to storage, you'll see all of the hard drives showing up here. So this is the internal drive. That's an SSD. This is a second internal drive. That's an SSD. And this is the 5,400 This is a Western Digital My Passport. This is an incredibly popular drive. Let me see if I can grab it here while I've got. It's this guy while it's still connected. They're really cheap. They're big. This is 2 freaking terabytes in size, but the reason it's cheap is it's using a slow disk. So you can't really tell when this is twirled up like that, but if you twirl this down, you'll see it says fixed. That means that is it. Whoops. That's a hard drive platter, and there's the big indicator right there. Speed 5200 RPM. That means it's too slow. It's good for archiving. That's what I use that one for. I'll store things on it that I need to put away and get off my drive. But for playback, bad. So many manufacturers, especially in the PC side, will sell 2 drives, an internal fast SSD, but then they'll say, hey, you get 2 terabyte extra on an internal drive. I guarantee you that's a 5400 RPM drive. The second drive inside here on this Dell was actually a 7200 RPM fixed disk. I removed it and stuck a Samsung 1 terabyte extra drive in here. It's wicked fast. Now on the Mac, if you go to the Apple menu and hold the Option key down, you'll see system information pop up. And if you choose that, you can easily see what is connected to your computer. So if we come down here to SATA and SATA Express, you'll see right there Apple SSD, and it will show you what is connected to your computer. So system information is built into the Mac, and you can easily see if you've got a fixed drive, a RAID, or an SSD connected. Now let's talk about testing the speed. And for that, I'm going to use a Blackmagic program called Disk Speed Test. And what you can do is you can select the target drive, and I'll select that 2 terabyte drive, and then run the test. And it takes a moment. It's going to constantly write and read and write and read. So after it's done 1, you can stop it. So there's the write test, and there's the read test. And it'll go back to the write test, so you can stop it after that. And you'll see an indicator down here of what it thinks I can play back. So it thinks that I can write and read ProRes 422 all the way up to HD. It thinks I can do 2K. I doubt it. It thinks I can do Cinema DNG. It thinks I can play all these back. And that's with 1 stream. As soon as I start adding more streams, this is the 5400 RPM drive. It's not going to work. So let me choose a different drive. I'll choose the second internal drive. This is my SSD, and watch this. So we went from 53 and 60 to, holy smokes. And this is megabytes per second. The MB, the large B, is megabytes per second. And a lot of times you'll see megabits, which is 1/8 of that value. All right, so now look, it thinks I can read and write all the way up to 4K here on that secondary drive. So this is a good speed test to load. Unfortunately, on the Windows side, you have to install the whole Blackmagic desktop video stuff, which is a bit of a pain, but I'll put a link in the description. On the Mac, you can just go to the App Store and install Disk Speed Test. This is a great one to have around, and you grab a drive, you just stick it in and run this on the drive, and at least it will give you an indicator. Now, the last thing I want to show you is I want to show you that if you go to VashiVisuals.com, Vashi's a great editor, good friend of mine. He's got an article here, a blog post about 4K and beyond, and this chart is really useful. This chart will show you the data rate in megabits. That's the small b. So if you want to convert this, just Google convert megabits to megabytes, and you'll see 100 is equal to 12 megabytes per second. So once we get up to something like Blackmagic 4K, that's 1.4 gigabits per second. So about 1400 megabits. So if I type in 1400 here, that's 175 megabytes per second. That's a lot of information. And remember, this is all for one stream of video. You've got overlapping streams or graphics or anything like that going on. Now you double that or triple or quadruple depending on how dense your playback layer is and how many things that are going on inside your timeline. So this might be an eye-opener. This is not a quick fix. I find it really odd that when I search for a lot of this information, that I would see articles about magical solutions to make 4K playback better. You can't. I mean, I showed you a few things that you can tweak in Premiere Pro, but 4K is 4K. You want to play it back? Get a big ass RAID and a big connection and a fast CPU and a lot of RAM. That's how you're going to make everything playback quick. All right. Hopefully you found this informative. If you're new to Video Revealed, please take a moment and subscribe. If you want to support us some more, you can do that like our wonderful PayPal supporters. There's a link in the description, donate monthly or one time, or there's a link in the front of the channel. Till next time, I'm Colin Smith, and it's my job to give you the reality check you need to make sure your system is playing back the best it can.